Hi guys, so we're going to be doing some more addition problems using our tidy number strategy, and I'm going to go back and start again with some simple problems, and then we'll work our way up to some harder problems. Okay, so our first problem, 6 plus 9, and if you want, you can always draw your 6 and your 9, 8 and 9, to help you to understand. Okay, so when we look at our instructions, the first step that we have to do is we have to find the number that's closest to a tidy number. So if we've got 6 and we've got 9, tell me which number is closest to a tidy number. A tidy number, remember, is a number that ends in 10. So I'm going to say both of them. The tidy number would be 10. Which one's closest? Yep, so it's going to be 9. So this is my number that's closest to a tidy number. Now what I have to do is make that number a tidy number by borrowing from the second number. So the 6 is my second number. And to do that, I have to ask myself, how many do I have to add or subtract to make a tidy number? So to make 9 a tidy number, and my tidy number would be 10, how much do I have to add or subtract? I have to add, and how many is it? Just 1. And remember, with tidy numbers, what we're doing is we're borrowing from one side and bringing it across to the other. So that way we're still dealing with the same total number of like counters or whatever it is you're adding, but we're just making the problem easier solved because we're moving across and making one of our numbers a tens number, a tidy number. So if we do plus 1 on this side, what do we have to do on this side? We have to do take away 1. So we always do the opposite. So now we have our new problem. 6 minus 1 is 5. And 9 plus 10, we know that's our tidy number. That is 10. 5 plus 10 is 15. Okay, and then you can go back and check to make sure this makes sense. You can count up all your numbers if you'd like, doing a normal strategy you usually use. So I've got 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So the strategy does work. Okay? And I'd like you to stop the video and do it at the same time as me. But then if you do find it hard, you can always just wait for me to show you the next step, and then you can do it after I've done it. Okay, so now I've got to have 7 plus 8. Okay, and if you'd like, you are able to draw your 7. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, I've got 7 and I've got 8. If I look back to my instructions, I want you to pause the video and I want you to tell me what is the first step for using the tidy number strategy. Hint, if you're not too sure, you can look over here and read that for me, but tell me, what is the first step? So the first step is we have to find the number that's closest to a tidy number, and if we've got 7 and 8, we have to figure out, which number is closest to a tidy number. For both 7 and 8, for both 7 and 8, the tidy number that it's closest to would both be 10. Okay? Now, which one out of 7 or 8 is closest to 10? Pause the video and tell me, and then I want you to explain why as well. So tell me which number is closest and why is it closest. Okay, so you're right if you said that 8 is closest to our tidy number. And the reason why our 8 is closer is because you only have to add 2 compared to having to add 3 from our 7. So that means 8 is our number that's closest to a tidy number. So that's our first step, find the number closest to a tidy number. Pause the video and tell me what the second step is. So, the second step is that you make the number a tidy number by borrowing from your second number. And when I say second number, it's the number that's not the tidy number. So it's going to be this one over here, number 7. Okay, so to do that, you need to ask yourself, step 3, How many do I have to add or subtract to make a tidy number? I want you to quickly pause the video and read that yourself because it helps you to remember it if you say it out loud. So pause the video, say number 3. So, how many do I have to add or subtract to make a tidy number? I've got 8 and I know that I need to make it 10. How much do I have to add or subtract? I have to add 2. And now what I'm doing, if I'm adding 2, I'm taking it away from my 7, I'm borrowing it, and I'm giving it to my 8. So that means I have to do the opposite to the other side. And when I say other side, that means I'm doing the opposite to number 7. So if I'm going plus 2 on this side, what do I have to do on this side? Take away 2. Okay, so now my problem is 5 plus 10. Now, which is easier to solve? 7 plus 8 or 5 plus 10? 5 plus 10 is much easier to solve because we're dealing with a tidy number, a number that ends in 10. So all we have to do is add our 10 and add our 5, our 10s and our 1s. So 5 plus 10 is 15. Now this is a slightly trickier one. Okay, I've got 13 and I have 8. 10, 11, 12, 13, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, pause the video and tell me what the first step is when we are using our tidy numbers strategy. First step is we have to find the number that's closest to our tidy number. And this one's a little bit trickier because you've got to think about the tidy number that it's closest to. But you can use what you know about rounding to help us, okay? So if you think about rounding numbers, if we've got our 3, we can imagine our hill, remember our hill, and we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, if I was to stop at my 3, I would go back down. So the closest number for 13, the closest tidy number for 13 is 10. Now the closest number for 8, remember if I stopped at my 8, I would have to keep going, so the closest number would also be 10. So one time I'm having to subtract, other times I'm having to add. So now I want you to pause the video and I want you to figure out for me which number is closest to a tidy number. Is it 13 or is it 10? And I'm going to give you a hint. To figure out what number is closest, you need to subtract the numbers, okay? You need to subtract the big number by the little number. So this one here, you'd have to go 13, take away 10, and this one you have to go 10, take away 8. Or in your mind, 10 and keep counting on till you get to 13, or 8, keep counting on until you get to 10. So pause the video and figure out which number is closest to a tidy number. So, to get from 13 to 10, there's different ways that you can solve this. You can either go 13, take away 10, which is 3, or you can imagine you've got 10 on a number line, and you've got 13 here. And you could count 1 by 1 until you get to 13. So 10, 11, 12, 13. So how many is that? That is 1, 2, and 3. Okay, compared to 8 to 10, I can either do 10 take away 8, or I can go 8, 9, 10. And how many is that? That would be 2. So which one is closest? It is my 8. Okay, so those are different ways that you can figure out the difference and figure out which one is closest. And it's up to you. You can either subtract or you can think in your mind 8, 9, 10. So that's like adding. So first up we figure out what number is closest to our tidy number, and we know that it's 8. Now pause the video and tell me what the second step is. Now we have to make a tidy number by borrowing from our second number. To do that, we need to read question 3 for me. Pause the video and read question 3. We need to ask ourselves, how many do I have to add or subtract to make a tidy number? Okay, so if 8's my tidy number, the closest number that's if 8 is the number that's closest to my tidy number, and we know my tidy number is going to be 10, how many do I have to add or subtract to make 10? I have to add 2. Okay, so if I'm adding 2, pause the video and tell me, what am I doing on this side to my 13? I have to subtract 2. And I want you to pause the video quickly and tell me, why do you have to subtract 2 from the 13? So, you have to subtract 2 from the 13 because you're just borrowing from one side and giving it to the other so you can make a tens number. You're still dealing with 13 plus 8, you've just made the problem easy to solve by shifting 2 of your counters, 2 of your whatever you're counting, over to the other side. Okay, so 13 take away 2 is 11. 8 plus 2 equals 10. Now, to add these together, we've got 10 and 11. What we need to do first is add our tens. So we've got, I'll just have to move my thing down a smidge. We have our 10 over here and our 10 over here. So we go 10 plus 10. And 10 plus 10, so it's our ones and our ones, that gives us 20. Okay, and if you know what 1 plus 1 is, 1 plus 1 is 2, then you know what 10 plus 10 is, that's 20. Then all we need to do is add our ones, and as you can see we only have one lot of ones. We've just got 1 here because over here we have a 0. So 20 plus 1 equals 21. Okay. Got 12 plus 9. Okay, and again you can draw 12 and 9. So now make sure you're solving this at the same time as I am, so you're working it out as well. First up, tell me what the first step is for using the tidy numbers strategy. First step, we've got to find the number that's closest to a tidy number. We have 12 and we have 9. So first you need to figure out what tidy number both these numbers are closest to. And if you need to, remember you're rounding. And then you need to figure out which one is closer. So pause the video and figure that out. And then I'm going to show you. Okay, so for 12, the tidy number that it's closest to is 10. Because if we imagine on our hill, if we stopped over here, we would have to go back down again, wouldn't we? So if we're going back down again, we'd be going back down to 10. So the tidy number that 12 is closest to is 10. Now the tidy number that's closest to 9 is what? It's also 10. Okay, because remembering if a number is 5 or more, you round up. So which number is closest to a tidy number and why? Pause the video and explain that to me. So if you said 9 is the closest to a tidy number, then you are correct. And the reason for that is 9, we only have to add 1 compared to 12, the difference is 2. Okay? So here we go. So this is our tidy number. What is our second step? Pause the video and tell me our second step. Second step is to make the number a tidy number by borrowing from our second number. And to do that, we have have to ask ourselves, how many do I have to add or subtract to make a tidy number? Okay, so I want you to pause the video and I want you to figure out what we have to do. And even better, if you can do the thing on the side to the 9 and also go ahead and do the thing to this on the 12. Okay, and then I'm going to show you afterwards. But pause the video, figure it out, and then I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so to make this number a tidy number, I'm going to have to be adding, and I'm going to have to be adding just 1. If I'm adding 1 on this side, what am I doing on this side? I have to take away 1, because what I'm doing is I'm just making the problem easier to solve by moving 1 counter or 1 whatever on one side to the other to make our tidy number. We're still doing 12 plus 9, but I've just made it a bit easier to solve by changing my numbers around a little bit. Okay, so that makes, we've got to do a new problem now. Write the new problem underneath for me. Pause the video and do that for me. Okay, so 12 minus 1 is 11. And 9 plus 10 gives us 10. That's funny, I happened to do the same problems in a row. We did 11 plus 10 last time. So I want you to pause the video and see if you can remember how to add 10 and 11 together. So what you have to do is first add your 10s, and you could end up doing this in your head, but if you have to for now, you can write it all down. If this is too easy for you, you don't have to write all this stuff down. You can just look at the problem and figure it out. So 11 plus 10. First up, we need to add our 10. So 10 plus 10 is 20. Then we need to add our 1s, but we only have one lot of 1s because the whole point of our strategy is to have our second number ending in a 0. So 20 plus 1 is 21 again. Okay? Alright. And if at any point you don't have to write the dots anymore, that's totally fine. You don't have to keep writing the dots. I'm just putting everything down just in case you need to. Okay, so another one. Eight plus 25. Okay, so now our numbers probably are a little bit too big for you to draw every single dot for 25, so you can just do it by making a little pile, and you'll still be imagining that you're taking from one of the piles. Okay, so what I want you to do is pause the video and do the first step for me. So our first step is to figure out which number is closest to a tidy number. And to do that, we can use what we've learnt about rounding to help us. So what we need to do is figure out what tidy number, what number that ends in 0, is closest. So 8, what is the tidy number that it's closest to? It's closest to 10, because if we think of our rules for rounding numbers, if it's 5 or more, we round up. Okay? Now again, for 25, what tidy number is it closest to? Remember our rule for rounding. So, with our rule, if it's 5 or more, then we have to round up. So, our closest tidy number then is 30. That was a terrible, firstly a terrible 3 and a terrible arrow. So 30. Now we have to figure out which one is closest. Okay, so I think the best way is either to subtract or to be able to count on from our smaller number and see how much it takes for us to get to our tidy number. So for 8, how many do we have to add to get to 10? Figure it out for me, and then pause the video and figure it out for me, and then I'll explain it to you. Okay, so if we imagine we've got 8, and we need to figure out how many we have to add to get to 10. 8, 9, 10. 9, 10, that is 2. Okay? So you can do that do this at home for any adding or quick adding or subtracting. While we need to use our tidy numbers, if you have to remember some subtraction type strategies in your head, you can do this. Okay? Compared to 25, we need to get to 30, so we need to count 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we're adding 5. So the closest number that's to our tidy number would be our 8. Okay, because we're only adding 2 compared to having to add 5 to our 30. So this is our number that's closest to a tidy number. Okay, so now I want you to pause the video, tell me the next step, and then do the next step for me, please. And if you can go the next step, it would be great if you could then do the thing on this side and whatever it is you have to do on this side. Pause the video and do that for me. So, next step, we have to make this number a tidy number by borrowing from our second number. Okay, so now 8, how much do we have to add? We have to add 2. If we're adding 2 on this side, that means we're taking 2 on this side. Okay, so that means we have to take away 2 over here. So our new problem is 10 plus 25 take away 2, 25, 24, 23, 10 plus 23. Now what we have to do is add our place value. So we're going to add our 10s first. So we're going to add 10 and 20. 10 plus 20. And if we know what 1 plus 2 is, 1 plus 2 is 3, then we know 10 plus 20 is 30. Now our last step is we need to add our 1s. And we only have one lot of 1s because our number over here is a tidy number. So we're going to go 30 plus 3. 30 plus 3 equals 33. Okay, so how did you find those problems? Were they getting easier for you to solve? I think we'll do one more with a bigger number like our tens numbers. I'm going to make it a bit harder now, and then if you do well on this, then you can do the follow-up that I'm going to share with you. Okay? Alrighty. So 13 plus 28, they're big numbers, but I am sure that you can solve this. To remind you again, you can do your big pile and your smaller pile if you need to remind you about how you're going to be taking one from the other side. Now, what is the first step? Pause the video and say what the first step is. Okay, so the first step is that you have to figure out which number is closest to a tidy number. So we've got 13 and we've got 28. And what we can do is use our knowledge of rounding numbers to figure out what number is closest to a tidy number. So remember our rule. What is our rule actually? Pause the video and tell me what our rule is for rounding numbers. So, rounding numbers, the rule is if it's 5 or more, we round up, and if it's less than 5, we round down. So quickly, pause the video and figure out for me what number we're going to be rounding these numbers to. Okay, so for 13, we're remembering that if it's 5 or more, then we have to round, up, and if it's less than 5, we round down. So we're imagining if we had our hill, we're stopping here. That means we're going to have to be going back down. So if we're going back down, that means we're rounding down to 10. Now, 28. What we have to do is we're imagining we're finishing at our 8. Our rule is if it's 5 or more, we round up, and if we look at our hill, if we were to stop at 8, we would have to keep going to the next number. So we are like rounding up. Whoops. So that means it is 30. Now, I want you to figure out and tell me which number is closest to my tidy number? Pause the video and tell me. Okay, so if I've got 13 and 10 and 28 and 30, I have to count on from my smaller number and figure out which number is closest. So for 10 and 13, I've got 10, I have 10, and then I'm going 11, 12, 13. So that's 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I have to add 3. To get from 28 to 30, I've got 28, then I go 29, 30. That is just adding 2. So which number is closest? The number that's closest is 28. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and underline my 28 because that's my first step. Okay, now tell me the second step. Pause the video, tell me the second step, and then solve it for me. So we have to make this 28 a tidy number by borrowing from my second number. So we need to do question number 3, and then I want you to do 3 and then the and part, and I want you to solve this part for me, okay? Pause the video and solve it for me, and then I'm going to show you. So we have to ask ourselves, how much do we have to add or subtract to make this number a tidy number? We have to add 2. We have to add 2. If we're adding 2 on this side, what are we doing on this side? We're taking away 2. Okay, because we're imagining that we're just borrowing and giving to this number here, so we still actually have the same total number of counters or whatever it is that we're adding. Okay, so 13 take away 2. Now the next step I want you to do, pause the video, and I want you to write the new problem for me if we do our take away 2 and our plus 2. Okay, so 13 take away 2, 13, 12, 11. So it's 11. 11 plus 28 plus 2, and we know that it's making our tidy number, so that's going to be 11 plus 30. Now our next step is we have to add our 10s and 1s. I want you to pause the video and have a go, and then if you do struggle, you can unpause the video and I'm going to explain it to you anyways. Okay, so 11 plus 10. Our first step is that we have to add our 10s. So we're adding 10 plus 30. 10 plus 30 equals what? If you know what 1 plus 3 is, 1 plus 3 is 4. So 10 plus 30 is 40. Okay, because we go 10, 20, 30, 40. Alright, now the next step is that we have to add our 1s. And we've only got one lot of 1s in here. So now we have to add our 1. That gives us 41. Alrighty, so we're going to stop there, and I'd like you to have a go at the follow-up that I'm going to share as a link, and see how you go. And if you ever have to, you can come back to this video. You can watch the very first video on tidy numbers if you want. If you're ready for a challenge, you can go back and watch that second video. This is video number 3, to just go back over the steps so that we remember, so we're really confident. But it's quite good really, because we've just done rounding numbers. You need to use that knowledge of rounding numbers to figure out what number is closest to a tidy number. Sometimes that can be the hardest step. And once you've done that, once you've changed a number to a tidy number, it's a lot easier to solve. So, hopefully you found that okay. Have a go at the follow-up activity if you feel confident.